are these people?
What's up, everybody? It's us, Iron and News. Me, Reef Breland, my friend Collin Radix-Carter, aka Care Bear.
But
We figured we'd get an extra story this Friday for y'all. So,
yeah,
Care Bear
so
decided he
I
wanted to
have
rant on some shit.
kind of. So I just have to remember this will come out Friday.
Yes.
I would have talked about student loan debt Wednesday. So
When
I'm
does
speaking so I'm speaking in the
future?
past future in preparing for this. So I just
Yes.
have to remember it's
Right?
see, this
um,
is the issue of putting out several stories in advance of when
yes.
they're going to premiere.
Yes.
Um, but if you watch our live stream on Wednesday, you would know, or watch the clap after Wednesday, you'll probably know that I will talk extensively about student loan debt, which makes sense because SCOTUS is hearing oral arguments for it starting
Mm.
today, as of this recording, Tuesday. So in light of that, I happened to come across an article written by the Associate Press, which talks about favorite judge. Well, all of them are our favorites, but this one in particular, Judge Clarence Thomas, or Justice Clarence Thomas, I should say, complaining about student loan debt.
Yay.
Yeah? So you think that actually sounds good for us, right?
You would think, but knowing our administration and SCOTUS as a whole, you know, not gonna be. There's gonna be some fine print in here. I guarantee you. You
Yeah.
know.
So you haven't read this yet.
No,
So
sir.
you're going into this blind. So
Yep.
yeah. So anyway, as I said, this article is from the Associate Press, and it's written by Mark Sherman and Jessica Gresno, where they
Gresco.
report. It's hard to kind of see actually.
Yeah,
Look,
it's Gresco. There you go.
Fresco. Okay. All right. You can zoom out. Where it says Justice Thomas wrote of crushing debt of student loans. So I have some thoughts,
Mm.
but we'll continue reading this and then I'll share and then you can kind of share your thoughts after
Okay.
this. But so they write the Supreme Court won't have far to look if it wants a personal take on the crushing weight of student debt that underlies the Biden administration's college loan forgiveness plan. Justice Clarence Thomas was in his mid 40s and in his third year of the nation's highest court when he paid off the last of his debt from his time at Yale Law School. Thomas, the court's longest serving judge and staunchest conservative, has been skeptical of the other Biden administration initiatives. And when the Supreme Court hears arguments Tuesday, this week, involving President Joe Biden's debt relief plan that will wipe away up to $20,000 in outstanding student loans, that's again per person,
Yeah.
Thomas is not likely to be a vote in the administration's favor. But the justices' own experiences can be relevant in how they approach a case, and alone among them, Thomas has written about this role student loans played in his financial struggles. I miscut a paragraph. Okay, anyway. A fellow law student, a fellow law school student even suggested Thomas declare bankruptcy after graduating to get out of under the crushing debt of all of my student loans. The justice wrote in his best-selling 2007 memoir, My Grandfather's Son. He rejected the idea. It's not clear that any of the other justices borrowed money to attend college or law school or what have done so for their children's educations. Some justices grew up in relative wealth. Others reported they had scholarships to pay their way through some of the country's most expensive private institutions. Of the 7 justices on the court who are parents, 4 have signaled through investments that they don't want their own children to be saddled with onerous college debt and have piled money into tax-free college savings accounts that might limit any need for loans. Chief Justice John Roberts and Justice Neil Gorsuch have the most on hand, at least 600,000 and at least 300,000 respectively, according to annual disclosure reports the justices filed in 2022.
Hmm.
Each has 2 children. So, just to clarify, they each have close to or over half a million in debt still,
Right.
and they have kids who potentially, well, I'll get to that, but they're not going to have any debt more than likely.
Yeah.
So, because they're rich,
Right.
or at least in the class where they don't have to necessarily worry about that too much.
Hmm.
But yeah, just the idea that you could be like 500,000 in debt,
Yes.
like, like for like law school,
Hmm.
like is, like I know teachers who are in 6 digits in debt, but not to that amount of like a Supreme Court judge
I'm
having
surprised
that amount.
none of them commented.
Well, we'll get to that. But anyway, we'll continue though.
Yeah.
Um, you actually brought up a good point. Justices Amy Coney Barrett, who has 7 children, and Kenji Brown Jackson, who has 2, have invested money in college saving accounts in which any earnings or growth is tax-free if spent on education.
Hmm.
None of the justices would comment for this story, a court spokesman said. So, yeah, no one commented on it.
Gotcha.
Um, but let's continue. Thomas wrote vividly about his past money woes in his Up from Poverty story, recounting how a bank once foreclosed on one of his loans because repayment and delinquency notices were sent to his grandparents' house in Savannah, Georgia, instead of Thomas's home at the time in Jefferson City, Missouri. Thomas was able to take out another loan to repay the bank only because his mentor, John Van Werf, then Missouri Attorney General and later a U.S. Senator, vouched for him. Thomas noted that he signed up for a tuition postponement program at Yale, in which a group of students jointly paid their outstanding debts according to their financial ability, with those earning the most paying the most.
Makes sense.
At the time, Thomas's first wife, Kathy, was pregnant. I didn't know what else to do, so I signed on the dotted line and spent the next 2 decades paying off the money I borrowed during my last 2 years at Yale, Thomas wrote. When he was first nominated to be federal judge in 1989, Thomas reported $10,000 in outstanding student loans, according to a news report at the time. The Biden administration has picked the same number as the amount of debt relief most borrowers would get under his plan. Personal experience can shape the justices' questions in the courtroom and affect their private conversations about a case, even if it doesn't figure in the outcome.
Hmm.
It's helpful to have people with life experiences that are varied just because it enriches the conversation. Justice
Sotomayor.
Sonia Sotomayor has said.
There you go.
Sotomayor, like Thomas, also grew up poor. She got a full scholarship to Princeton as an undergraduate, she has said, and went on to Yale for law school, as Thomas did. Keeping people from avoiding the kinds of difficult choices Thomas faced is a key part of the administration's argument for loan forgiveness. The administration says that without additional help, many borrowers will fall behind on their payments once a hold in place since the start of the coronavirus pandemic 3 years ago is lifted, no later than this summer. Under a plan announced in August but so far blocked by federal courts, $10,000 in federal loans would be canceled for people making less than $125,000 or for households with less than $250,000 in income.
Which we covered.
Recipients of yes.
Yeah.
Recipients of Pell Grants who tend to have fewer financial resources will get an additional $10,000 in debt forgiven. The White House says 26 million people already had applied and 16 million have been approved for relief. The program is estimated to cost $400 billion over the next 3 decades. The legal fight could turn on any of several elements, including whether the Republican-led states and individuals suing over the plan have legal standing to go to court, and whether Biden has the authority under federal law for so extensive a loan forgiveness program.
Hmm.
Nebraska and other states challenging the program argued that far from falling behind, 20 million borrowers would also get a windfall because their entire student debt would be erased. Nebraska Attorney General Mitch Michael Hilgers wrote in the state's main Supreme Court brief. Which of those arguments resonate with the court may become clear on Tuesday. When she was dean of Harvard Law School, Justice Elena Kagan showed her own concern about the high cost of law school, especially for students who were considering lower paying jobs. Kagan established a program that will allow students to attend their final year tuition free if they agree to a 5-year commitment to work in the public sector. While that program no longer exists, Harvard offers grants to students for public service work. At the time the program was created, Kagan said she wanted students to be able to go to work where they can make the biggest difference, but that isn't the case now. Instead, she said, they often go to work where they don't want to work because of the debt burden.
Yep.
So, any thoughts on this before
No,
I share
just
my?
standard capitalistic like community practice, you know. Like I liked that she wanted that program, that she had made one, you know, for people who wanted to be like public defendants and whatnot. Like that was,
Mm,
I imagine you should be able to get full rides, you know, with
right.
that kind of
And for those of you who don't
commitment.
know, public defenders don't make any money. Um,
Zero. Big fat
so
zilches.
yeah, the money, if you're going into law, public defenders ain't it.
Ain't
So,
it.
so I knew of a lawyer who became a public defender. I think, and this was in Massachusetts, I think he was making, at least when he started, around 40 grand a year.
Yeah, usually
With
they're moonlighting with a firm to do that. Like,
right.
you know, and their firm might give them some incentives to moonlight that occasionally, you
Mhm.
know.
Right.
There was a whole documentary done about a guy that was like big public defender, um like he had a whole nonprofit dedicated to it.
Mhm.
But I mean, this is kind of like, so Cliff Notes this for people a little bit, where why you felt this Supreme Court decision is going to be a big deal, you know, like on what they're actually deciding on, you know.
Right. Yeah. I'll admit this was the title that how I titled it in the thumbnail was a little clickbaity. But for good reason, because I feel, and again, this is my personal opinion, I feel that this article was written in a way to kind of help us sympathize with
Mm,
the judge, especially Thomas, a little bit more, especially if they decide to screw people over
yeah,
um and shut down the idea of people getting student loan debt, but they can be like, oh, but we understand how you feel because we went through the same thing as you, you
right.
know. But again, the problem is, as you said, this is a matter of class.
Mm-hmm.
And as it was reported in the article, yeah, they're in, many of them are still in loads of debt, but they're working to ensure that their children won't be in that same kind of debt that they are in.
Yeah,
Um, and given their status, will never have to worry about being in any kind of debt, or at least not as much compared as them. Um, what if and when their children ever attend college?
right.
Like, many people do not have the ability to save up money for their children to go to college. That's not an option for many working or middle class people. So the idea that I just feel this article is kind of like a sweet spot for AP to kind of give some sympathy to these judges,
Yeah,
when the reality is that they're the ones that, and again, and I've said this in past streams, and I probably will say it on Wednesday, and I'm saying this again now. Um, there is no doubt in my mind that they're going to overturn Biden's student loan forgiveness plan, especially given that Biden used the HEROES Act instead of the Higher Education Act
Yeah.
um, as the
Reason
anchor
for, right.
to relieve debt. And again, as I said in past streams, Biden has said, in not so many words, the pandemic is over and the public emergency for COVID is going to end in mid-May. So
Hmm.
given reports, I hear that they will come up with a decision, I guess in late June, which by then, you know, like we're not in a national emergency anymore. So
Right.
my case that really it's not going to hold much standing to use the HEROES Act by that point if you're using COVID as the reason why it should be forgiven. Um, so again, I will go into more depth on this if you've watched the live stream already or the clip regarding this whole case, which I will talk about again. But yeah, I just felt in a way that I kind of gaslit y'all, and I kind of admit that. I felt like this AP kind of gaslit, its audience in terms of um,
As they
Clarence
tend to
Thomas
do.
making Clarence Thomas a little more sympathetic in terms of him and his experiences. And funny enough, how they use him being that he's one of the few judges of color who actually,
Yes, it's on
has
purpose.
gone through. Yeah, but I think the idea of like, oh, he pulled himself by the bootstraps and he struggled and he
Except,
made it to this position and he made it to this position and he worked really hard and eventually he was able to pay off, his
and if
debt.
and if you work just as hard in our capitalistic system, you can get, like,
But yeah, but that's kind of the vibe that I got from this article. It's kind of their way of saying, like if he was able to do it, you should be able to.
right.
So stop whining because you went into debt. You stop whining because you went into that major that is not, beneficial for you. Stop whining because you took out more than you were able to borrow. That's kind
Yeah.
of that vibe that I get from this.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I
uh,
normally, the only time I'd ever bring AP articles is to call out their nonsense. So glad you did. You
yeah.
know, this
So,
is this is what the AP does. They are mouthpieces for the establishment. Even though they're
right,
supposed to be Associated Press, they seem to only be associated with one kind of press. You know what I'm saying?
right,
Y'all get me?
right.
Okay.
So,
But yeah,
but yeah,
anyway, anything else? I think we covered it.
no, that's it. As I said, I will, again, I can't speak into what I'm going to say in the future, but
Cool.
I will do a more extensive take on this. So again, watch the live stream if you've already done, or you can watch the clip of said live stream when I'll talk about this a little bit more. But I felt like obviously this relates, and I know that this is an issue that people are going to talk about a lot this week, given that oral statements are being presented this week.
Um,
So I just felt it was kind of
Next
appropriate to kind
week
of.
we have Jose Vega coming on the show. If everything works out,
Mhm.
he confirmed he can do it, so we'll hopefully nothing comes up. But I don't think there's anything else. So as
Anything
always,
else?
kids, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
Bye. Have a great time.